We can have spiritual bread. We can enjoy breathing the air coming into our lungs, the sunshine. People talk about in certain philosophies, that's where they get their food, their nourishment, from the sun. We can get it from nature. But when we go back to the food and the addiction and have these drinks with 1,200 calories with the sugar, synthetic, all the synthetic stuff in it, what we're doing is we're saying to ourselves, this is my higher power. This is God. I have a friend here. If I have a problem today, I know the answer. For me, it used to be the food, but also the alcohol. My friend was alcohol. I knew I could come home and it would solve all my problems, right? The alcohol was a solution. The food is a solution. But was it really, right? Was it really? It devastated our lives, and look what it's done to us. And not only like physically and again mentally, once you make something your higher power, it could be a person. Imagine a switch in your brain. Say you're having a difficulty with somebody in your life, and there's somebody, say, a long lost love, or all these situations and interactions you have with people at work. When you realize, when you get your feeling and blissfulness from within, from spirituality, you can only sit there and smile. Because you have that, what they said here, that the patience, tolerance, and understanding and love. So your boss is yelling at your work. You could sit there and smile and say, okay, what did you want me to do? Okay, you understand. You have the understanding the boss feels like he's not being listened to, or he had a bad day. So, it had nothing to do with me. That's where the compassion, understanding, and love come in. So they're teaching these wives not to get out of itself. But by teaching them in this practical application, these steps in this whole big book, it's teaching us how to live life. This crazy chapter, right, which was years ago, which a lot of people don't want to read because it puts a woman in a certain position, right, which is a lot different today. And back then, that's the way they talked about things. But if we listen to the message here, it goes all the way around, whether it's children, husbands, wives, people at work, a clerk in the store, somebody cuts you off on the highway. We can only sit there and smile. But no, we get into the ego. I have to show the world, right? Don't they know who I think I am? You ever hear that expression, don't they know who I think I am? That's the perception change. That's a spiritual awakening. People say, oh, I haven't had a spiritual awakening. What is it? That's crazy. It's nonsense. If you're thinking today about a resentment, which a lot of us are, right? Something that happened to you yesterday, you can turn that switch and have a spiritual awakening right now. You could just say, wow, what does it matter if somebody cut me off? What does it matter what a clerk said? It has to do with them. Look, they're crazy. I always say this, they're crazy, but how crazy are we when we make it part of our lives? A person goes around pushing people's buttons is crazy, but the people who react to them, they're crazier. Why not? Why? Do you understand that? When you react to somebody, you're going to say they're toxic, they're crazy, right? No, we're the crazy ones for reacting the way we did. We go around, and talk about toxic people. A lot of people use that phrase, this person's toxic, that person's toxic. All of a sudden, I had to say, what kind of a son was I? What kind of a brother was I? What kind of a father am I? I had to look at myself. Because a lot of people, sometimes it was imaginary in my mind. I felt that they didn't like me or they said something the wrong way. Maybe they just tried to be funny. But even if they did mean it to upset me, I was toxic because of the way I reacted to that person. They may not have been the best person in the world, but I came from a position of the self. If you come from a different position, you change your perception in love and tolerance and patience, the world around you, people are going to change. If they don't, that's fine too. But what are they going to do? They're going to change. Most of the time, if your perception changes, the world around you changes. They talk about in this program about making amends to people. When you have this spiritual awakening, when you come from like these wives started to change, when you walk up to a person that you have to make an amends to, it's going to be totally amazing. Those people are going to just see it in your smile. It talks about here when Ebby came in to see Bill, they couldn't even recognize his eyes. His eyes lit up. You'll have such love and compassion coming from that point of view. The other person will just right away notice this change in you. And that's what it is, because a lot of times, hey, people go and make amends, the next day they turn around, they're just as bad. But we can have that spiritual awakening here right now. I mean, again, I always say this, at this meeting, if that switch goes off, we called about the light switch going on, that change of perception. We can have it here right now and again towards the food, because a lot of people are here for the food, and that's one problem I had. I had the drugs and alcohol, but the food too. I had the people problem. It's all related. But you know what it is? It's all the same thing. It's to have the perception change, have the clarity, want the water, not those big gloopy drinks of synthetic sugars and everything like that. I have an orange, an apple here. I have everything here just saying this is God's creation. I mean, when you look at this is the beauty of God, what God created, right? But no, we want the synthetic chemicals 50 chemicals in the food. You want to know what my diet is? It's called one ingredient. Anything I eat, I don't, go to the grocery store if it has more than one ingredient, which is very hard to find. Everything, even the health, the buffets where they have all the health food, that has like 10, 20 ingredients. It's the salt, oil, and sugar. You know what the problem is? Is that when you go to a restaurant, some people say, I want a low carb, I want a high carb, I want a high protein diet. As I see it, the problem is that what you put on the food. Because you can look at parts of the world, we discussed the last meeting, where people eat a lot of carbohydrates, but they're very, very thin and in shape. Because it's what you put on the food. That's the big problem, is the junk we put on the food. You can have that perception change towards thinking. And I'm going to tell you this one story, and it has to do with this king of the kingdom. And this relates to how we can relate this to everything in our lives. So in one thing, like one situation, like these wives with the one devastating situation that their husbands were alcoholics, if they could overcome that, then everything else becomes easy. So anyway, the king went to the local shoemaker, and he says, look, I want the whole, he went to the local carpet store, was what it was. And he says, I want the whole kingdom carpeted, he says. Everything carpeted so I can walk and it can be luxurious. So anyway, the guy who owned the carpet store says, look, I'm going to die. The king's going to kill me. I can't do what he wants. But what he did, he came to the king the next day and he had a pair of shoes with the carpeting underneath it, right? So when we have this knowledge, we don't have to, in every situation, figure out what to do. It will apply to everything. With your boss at work, somebody cuts you off on the highway, clerk in the store. We can come to that spiritual awakening. But it starts a lot of times, that's why we say the more difficult your situation. So if you have a very difficult spouse, like these people had, when they overcame that, when they got themselves into another spiritual awakening and they had a different perception about life, things around them changed because the perception. Look, the whole world is our perception anyway. The way you see the world is it comes in and then the perception. Again, 10 people have 10 different perceptions of the world. So when we change, things we have to change is not our geographical location. We don't have to change how much money we make, how successful we are, our position at work. Those are going to fail us every time. And, it's really sad for a person who achieves a lot of monetary and success in life, the physical success or the monetary success. It's much harder for them to come to terms and have that spiritual awakening because they're going to be looking. They could be the second richest person in the world. They want to be number one and be on a yacht, a billionaire. Somebody else has $2 billion. And the food, the same thing. More food. The more food you want to gratify you, the more and more you're going to want. When we come from that point of view, when you have the perception change that our body's God's temple, and then life too, the perception is all of it. We can't change the sorry world. It's called the sorry world. We can be in the world but not of it. Go out and enjoy the world, but get at those 5 senses it talks about on page 85, the sixth sense, or the fourth dimension. These things aren't true. We don't have to try anymore. When that spiritual light bulb goes off and we start to say, all of these things I'm thinking about, all of these monetary things, all of these people and the situations, the resentment, the anger, the fear, it's coming from a false premise. It's coming from people told you how to be better than others. I always use that word self-esteem. What's self-esteem, right? Self-esteem, people say, I got to build my self-esteem. It has the word self in it, ego. It means, what is it saying? If I have a better car, if I'm better than another person, I'll be happy. No, what we want is humility. Humility, God's humility. When we have that humility and we just, we get out of ourselves and we think ourselves is really nothing, which we are. Or just a bunch of chemicals made up. Then that perception, then the real joy and happiness can come out. It's in there. It's in every one of us. We block it out with, this craziness. When you get out of self and you get centered, that's where the prayer meditation, Eastern Western philosophy, it's all in the steps. Eastern Western philosophy, all the philosophies of the world, you read this first 164 pages, you go do these steps. The real wisdom is getting out of self. People try get a PhD? A person says, I'll get a PhD, I'll learn more about everything about the world, I'll travel the world. You want, the real wisdom, they say in religion and all of these, in this book here, it's all about getting out of the self, forgetting the self. Then the source, you can't teach anybody anything. It's already in it. All the answers are here. You want an answer to your problem, don't call, like we say, 10 people. Don't sponsor 100 people. Don't go to 1,000 meetings, right? The answer is in here. Get centered. Get centered. The whole solution is let go. Letting go, that's the whole program. Sometimes somebody will miss the program. They won't come here and it says, well, tell me a little bit about what you spoke about, Bob. I just, well, it's letting go. There's nothing else I have to tell you. Third step prayer says what? It says getting out of the self, giving ourselves over to God, a higher consciousness, so long as it's not me, nature, spirit of universe, whatever you want to call it. This whole life and the whole world can open up to you. We're finite with the food. We're in the food. We're in the drugs. We're in addiction to people, to the self. When we get out of the self, we can only sit there, it says in this book, and smile.